Luke chapter 7, starting in verse 36. And what I'm about ready to give you is probably the only thing you need to remember from the whole night. Yeah, like if I had to say, if Shad would have said you got 15 minutes instead of 2 hours, this is what I would have done. What I'm about to do right now, okay? This is it. Like this is the mother load, okay? This is the one thing. If you have to take a note, if you want to write something down, I'm not going to tell you yet what to write down, but if there's one thing I want you to not miss, it's what we're about ready to see here in Luke 7, which, by the way, is part of that whole thing jumping off that whiteboard, okay, in a second. So Luke 7, starting in verse 36. I know a lot of you guys, what translations do most of you read? ESV. By the way, I have tried, when I kind of put myself into my Bible, the ESV wasn't a translation yet. So the best literal translation at the time was the New American Standard. It was the best teaching Bible at the time. Now, if I had to start over again, I'd get an ESV. The problem is I don't have a great memory, like specifics, but like I remember what's on a page. And so I've had this in fact, this is my Bible cover. I've had this Bible cover for at least 25 years, and I've had this Bible longer than that. I've just locked in. I've tried to go. I got a great ESV study Bible, and I've tried to go to it, and I can't. I was in Durham this last week teaching a group of men, and I got there, and I realized I'd forgotten my Bible. And they said, well, we got a Bible, and he handed me a Bible. First, I couldn't read it because I'm 53 years old, and the print was too small. But also, I didn't really feel like I could teach out of it. And so here's what I did. I called my wife, and I said, go up in her bedroom, grab my Bible, and I said, and go to that verse. It was actually, I was going to do something in Luke 9. I said, go to Luke 9. I said, on the left-hand side of the page, you're going to see some notes in the margin. There's a stick-em note there. And then on the right-hand side of the page, I'm teaching out of that passage, okay, the feeding of the 5,000. I said, I want you to take a picture with your phone of both pages and email them to me. And so then I took the pastor. I was there helping. I was mentoring this pastor in Durham. He was doing this inner city church there. It's really cool what they got going on there. And I was teaching these guys. And I took his wife's iPad, and I just had photographs of the 2 pages of my Bible. And I taught out of my Bible on her iPad. Okay? So I'm kind of stuck in the NAS, but the ESV is pretty close, so you can follow along with me, okay? It says, now one of the Pharisees was requesting him to dine with him. And it's talking about Jesus. And he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And behold, there was a woman in the city who was a sinner. Okay, now in this story, if you're familiar with the story, this woman in the city who was a sinner, they knew she was a sinner. Publicly she was a sinner. Does anyone have an idea what her sin was? Yeah, she was a prostitute. Okay, she was a known prostitute. It says, and when she learned that Jesus was reclined at the table in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster vial of perfume. Now, back in that day, what was the penalty for adultery? It was stoning. What people executed that penalty? Religious leaders. So this woman was a known adulterer, and she's going to walk into the house of a Pharisee, which means that she's walking into the house of the one who would execute her for her known sin. Now, that's important, because what that means is this woman had come to a place where she just didn't want to survive anymore. And Jesus had already started preaching. In fact, he'd already started talking about how his burden was light and it was easy, and how he came to love people who were blowing it. And he came to love people who were tired and who were weary, and he came for them. And she'd been hearing about this Jesus, and so she's looking at her own life saying, you know what? I am so tired of this life that it's okay with me if it might be my last one. And if Jesus is not who I heard he was, I know I'm going to get stoned tonight. But I'm kind of putting all my chips I'm just pushing them in. And I'm throwing it down with this to see. And I'm praying to God in heaven that everything I heard about him is true. Because if it's not, I'll be stoned. But I'd almost prefer that over the life I've been living. You hear that? That's the level of desperation that was in this woman. And she walks in, it says she throws herself at his feet. And by the way, she has this alabaster vial of perfume. Where'd she get the money to buy it? Yeah, in her sin even. And here's what happens. It says, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and kept wiping them with the hair of her head and kissing his feet and anointing them with perfume. Now you got to picture this scene. This woman is down on the ground and she's not sort of crying. It says she is weeping, which means she is a mess, which means you got the dirt of his feet and you got the perfume and you got her hair pushed over the top. And, you know, when you're sobbing, like what else happens besides tears coming out of your eyes? So her nose is running and mascara is pouring and you got dirt and you got body odor and you got feet and you got perfume and you got snot and you got tears and you got makeup and you got wailing and you got hair, and this woman is a mess. Do you see that? She was a mess. And she's literally at his feet. And this is the spectacle that Jesus is looking at. It says, and when the Pharisee, verse 39, it says, and when the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who and what sort of person this woman is who is touching him, and that she is a sinner. It says, and Jesus answered and said to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. And he replied, say it, teacher. Verse 41, a certain moneylender had two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they were unable to repay, now who was unable to repay, the 500 or the 50? Both. When they were unable to repay, he said, he graciously forgave them both. Which of them, therefore, will love him more? And Simon answered and said, I suppose the one whom he forgave more. And Jesus said to him, you have judged correctly. And then this is the statement in the whole story. And you got to catch this kind of detail. It says, and turning toward the woman, he said to Simon. Now, even in that moment, if you're this woman, what are you feeling besides the guilt and shame that brought you there? Okay, what are you feeling now? You've thrown yourself in this house. You're at this guy's feet. You're sobbing. You're a mess. You're pouring this stuff out. You're wiping his dirty feet with your hair. You look up and there's snot running out of your nose and makeup pouring off your eyes, and your hair's all mixed in with that dirt and that perfume, and you're looking up at him, and what are you feeling? Start here. What question are you asking? Yeah, what's he going to do with me? So you're afraid. Is he going to do with me what every other man has ever done? Because she used men to get what she needed, but men used her to get what they needed. And it's not like incidental that this woman is coming to a man. Vulnerable. Listen, do you think this woman was vulnerable with men? She was sleeping with them for money. That woman was hard as a rock. Think she trusted men? Heck no. In this moment, she's down there at his feet, and she's terrified. Like, what's he think of me? And here he does. It says he looks right at her. Now, what's that communicating already? He's looking at her. If you're the woman, what are you getting from that? He hasn't said a word yet. What are you getting from that? Oh my God, it's this. Like, he hadn't said a word yet, but it's like, yeah, I see you. I've seen you for a long time. I saw you in every bed you've been in. I saw you. I've seen everything about you. And what kind of look is it? Is it disgust, you think? Is it revulsion? Is it judgment? It's a look. And this is what I love. He's looking at the woman. Can I pick on you? He's looking at the woman. It's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? He's looking right at her. She probably was doing that too a little bit. Oh, God, he's looking at me. It says, turning toward the woman, he says to Simon. Now, this whole time he's talking to Simon, but he's looking at the woman. He doesn't take his eyes off her. And he's talking to him the whole time. That's awesome, isn't it? And here's what he says. He says, do you see this woman? Now already, yeah, see, you thought you saw her? Man. I see her. Like he's talking to him, but you're hearing something, aren't you? He says, do you see this woman? Implied, no, you don't see her, but I do. He said, I entered your house, and he's still talking to him, but looking at you. He said, I entered your house and you gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. He says, you gave me no kiss, but she, since the time I came in, has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with perfume. He's still looking at her. For this reason I say to you, he's talking to him, but he's looking at you. He says, for this reason I say to you, her sins, which are many. Like, okay, let's just go ahead and say what's true. I don't have to minimize this. I don't have to pretend. I don't have to make it less than it is. Like, we all know this is a big deal. I see her, but I see what you don't see. Her sins, which are many, have been forgiven, for she has loved much. But he who has forgiven little loves little. Simon. See, the problem with you, Simon, is you not only didn't see this woman, but you don't see yourself. You don't see yourself. And you have such a little need. You love so little, and you have such a little God. And that's your problem. See, Jesus was hard on two groups of people in the New Testament, the religious and the wealthy. And what do those two groups of people have in common? They're self-sufficient. They're good enough not to need God or need much of him, or they're wealthy enough that they don't really have to feel their need. Which, by the way, I just described everyone in this room. And I don't care if you're an intern in the Emerging Leader Program. If you got more than one pair of clothes and you got another pair of shoes and you might even know how you're getting here tonight and you're not worried about whether you're going to eat tomorrow morning, even if you got some ramen noodles back there in the apartment, you are part of the 1% of the richest that have ever lived in the history of the world. And you're in Downline, which means you're religious enough. So you're religious and you're wealthy, which means you could be in danger of loving little because you don't see how great you have a need, because you become self-sufficient with how good you become, because quite frankly, you've done quite a bit of this. And you can feel pretty good about yourself doing it once in a while when you're not tired of it. And if you're not tired of it yet, it's just because yet hadn't happened. Because anyone that you have to perform for to belong and matter, you will ultimately despise. You'll resent how much work it takes to stay in relationship with them. Because it's not a relationship at all. Because you're meant to be in a relationship with people where you matter and belong because you matter and belong. And that's when Jesus said, unless you become like a child, you're going to miss me. Because children know that. And adults grow up. And they start working. And he said to her, your sins have been forgiven. It says, and those who reclined at the table with him began to say to themselves, who is this man who even forgives sin? And he said to the woman, your faith has saved you, go in peace. Now watch this. What did that woman bring? Here it is. I'm going to lay it on you. What did that woman bring to Jesus? She brought the perfume. Yeah, that was like incidental. What did she have to bring in the room that night? What's that? Her mess. What's another word for that? Yeah, she brought her sin in there. Like she brought her need in there. What was lost in the garden? Need. She brought her need in there. By the way, do you see any promises of a changed life? Do you see any commitment to change your lifestyle? Is there any comment in there about, oh, by the way, I'm going to go get that job like making clothing. Like you need to know, Jesus, I'm going to stop making a living that way. Like I'm going to be your best follower. I'll be your most devoted woman, like in your group of people that are traveling around. Like I promise you, Lord, if you'll do all this, like I'm really going to change the way I live. Like I'm going to take off this life jacket right now. I'm going to throw it away. Does any of that happen in there? Any commitment to holiness? Any promise for discipleship? Does any of that happen in there? What's the only thing she brought? Her need. Now here's the good news. The good news is she brought the only thing that she needed to bring. It's kind of like if you're in Russia, you got rubles. If you're in the United States, you got dollars. Like she's with Jesus, she's got the one thing that he wants. And it's the only thing. What's the Apostle Paul say about all this? Your best works. What's that? Say it louder. He says, like filthy rags, like God's not that impressed with you. What's the Old Testament say about that? He says, burnt offering and sacrifice, like what? Doesn't really matter to me, but a broken and contrite spirit, I will not despise. The woman brought her need. Once she brought her need, what did Jesus do? What did he do? Yeah, before he forgave her, what was evident? Yeah, he saw her and brought himself to her. She brought her need, he brought himself. Here I am. I am everything you've ever wanted. I am every cry out you've ever had. I am the answer to every want you've ever had, every need you've ever dared to express, every hope you've thought about your life, everything, every molecule in your body cries out for. You just found it in me, and here I am. I'm not something you know about. I'm not something you learn about. I'm not something you systematize. I'm not something you can figure out. I'm a person, and I'm right here. And I ain't going anywhere. Brought himself. And if you're that woman and Jesus brings himself to you in your need, what are you feeling? What happens in you? How do you respond to that? By the way, do you think she followed him? There's no promise of it. But do you think she followed him? You bet. Like, I want to be with that. I want more of this. If this is what God is like, I want more of him with him. If it's me, I'm feeling gratitude. You've seen it. I mean, you've seen it on here. She brought her need. He brought himself. He brings himself. You respond with gratitude. Gratitude is where love comes from. I've been married 29 years. I want you to know there's one human being. I'll say this. There's no human being on this planet that I've hurt more. That I've hurt more than Brenda Schulte. That woman has raised and is raising 6 children with me. She has been frustrated with me. She's been lonely with me. She's been hurt by me. We have uprooted ourselves. She has had to be scared with me because I've lost jobs or whatever. I mean, crazy. I've harmed her. This just 29 years. And what's amazing to me is that woman wants me to come home tomorrow. Which means there's a ton of gratitude in me for her. And out of gratitude is where love comes from. And I want you to know something. I don't love my wife the same way I loved her 29 years ago, but I love her more than I've ever loved her. Does that make sense? Because I've had 29 years of gratitude for a woman that has stayed with me and keeps loving me. She sleeps with me. She argues with me. She fights with me. She forgives me. She stays with me. She tells the truth to me. She doesn't put up with crap from me. That woman is with me. She's in it with me. I got so much gratitude for her. I love her more than I've ever loved her. And the love is rich because it comes from gratitude. And then from love comes obedience. The Bible even says it. He says, if you love me, you'll what? Obey me. Obedience comes from love. And you know what it says about our love of God? It says we only love because he what? First loved us, which means we have to experience the love of God before we can even respond to love back. And so we bring our need, which is all we have. It was what was lost in the garden. God brings himself. We're grateful. That becomes love. Love becomes obedience, and obedience turns into sacrifice. Now, I want you to hear this. Most of us have been taught in different ways, whether it's verbally or just intuitively, that what we need, the way to walk in an intimate relationship with God, and what we need more of is this. Man, you need to love God more. Your problem is you just don't love God enough. You know what? The reason you're struggling is because you're not obeying him. Or you need to sacrifice more. And if you would sacrifice more, you'd experience more intimacy with God, brother. You're too much about yourself. You need to sacrifice more and put other people in front of yourself. Sacrifice and obey and love, and you know what? You're going to be okay. Does that resonate with you? Well, you need to hear something. You can't make yourself love anyone or anything. Like you can't stand there in a church service or in a quiet time and just like love. Like, come on, man. Just come on. Bam. Like you can't make yourself love. It's not in you. And then you walk out and go, well, hey, they all love God. Man, I'm kind of over here by myself. Okay. Oh, I love him too. Praise God, I love God. I don't even know if I do most days. But I'm not going to tell you that because I know you're all in love with him, but I don't even know if I know him, let alone love him. How do I love a God I can't touch or see anyhow? Some days I don't know, and I'm really tired of doing all that work anyhow, so most of the time I hate him and just can't tell the truth about it. I hate him that he doesn't seem like he's there. My life doesn't look like I thought it would look like. I married this person I'm not sure about, whatever. Like, you see that? You try to love God more, obey more, and sacrifice more, this will make you a really good Pharisee. And I want you to hear this. This is the pay dirt. It doesn't go this direction. That creates legalism and fatigue. And then it'll make you start having to fake it to sort of be in the club. Because everyone around you has something you think you don't have, and so you're going to have to fake it to be in fellowship with them. So you're going to walk into a church or into a fellowship or in a Bible study, and you're going to have to act like you're better than you are. Because you're afraid if you told the truth about where you really are, they wouldn't let you stay. And the irony is the church is the only place on planet Earth that the only reason you're allowed to come in is because you can tell the truth about how much you need to be there. And it's the one place where we can tell where we have a harder time telling the truth about it because we think we have to be not in need when we come in because no one else has a need, so I can't have one either. So how you doing? Man, I'm doing great, brother. Life is good. And God is good too. And somehow I have to have life be better than it is to protect God's reputation because life can't be hard and God still be good. Which that's very Greek, but not very Hebrew, because the Hebrews were the one that said, you know what, we can reconcile this thing. Life can be tragic and God can still be good at the same time, and I don't have to protect God's reputation by pretending life is better than it is. I can tell the truth about my life and still talk about the goodness of God, because the truth about my life allows me to apprehend what is true about God, and now you're reading the Psalms. Because David starts out and he says, my friends have abandoned me, I'm hurt, I'm afraid, nobody likes me, this life sucks right now. And then, only then he says, but this is true about God. Did I just offend some of you by saying that? Okay, we can talk about it later if I did. And then this is what's true about God. And in light of my life and what's true about God, then at the end of the Psalm, David says, I will worship this God. I brought my need, he brought himself to my need, and I'll worship a God that wants to be with a guy like me. So I want you to know all you got is the only thing you need. Thank God for this. The only thing you got in your pocket is need. Thank God you got dollars in America. If you're in Russia, you'd have rubles. Because the only thing God wants from you is your need. And that's all you got. So the prayer isn't, God help me love you more. God help me to obey you more. God help me to sacrifice more for you. If you are discipling others or being discipled, listen, take that off the table. All of this is a response. Not something you generate. It's something that's given to you, not something that you have. All you got is need. Need's the one thing that was lost in the garden. The minute you see your need, now you're cooking with gas because you bring your need to God, he brings himself to somebody like you and me. He brings himself to somebody like you and me. Now you got some gratitude. You got some gratitude. Now you're going to start falling in love with a God who wants to be with someone like you. And now as that gratitude becomes love, now you're going to obey that God who loves you because you're falling in love with him, because you're so grateful because he wants to be with you even though you are who you are. He keeps coming back, doesn't give up on you. And then you just might, in this lifetime, sacrifice a little bit because you're obeying him and you're loving him, but you're only loving him because he's with you. He's with you because you know him, and you only know him because you brought your need to him. And that, my friends, is called a relationship. And it happens. And now you're just that tree who's in a relationship with a God who sees you, knows you, and loves you. And you belong and matter to him. And it's no mistake that he says over and over and over again. How many times? He just gets so redundant. I'm never going to leave you or forsake you. I love you and I'm not leaving. Come on now, get this through to you. Gosh, I'm not going anywhere. Look, he tells Israel all the time, I didn't choose you because you're special. I made you special because I chose you. And you belong and matter to me because I decided that you were going to belong and matter to me. And you belong and matter to me because I made you and I love what I made because I don't make mistakes. And even when it looked like it all was a mistake, even then I was already doing something that was going to glorify me. I was promising a Messiah in Genesis 3:15. And then I was going to bring you to a place of recognition of your need. And the more you were going to see, by the way, watch this, see, which means experience your life in a fallen world. When you see, watch this, when you see, you're going to feel. When you see, you're going to feel. And when you feel, you're going to need. And when you need, you'll start desiring. And when you start desiring, now you'll start longing. And in your longing, now you'll start hoping. And the minute you start hoping, what's going to happen to you? If you start hoping for what you're made for, a life that Paul said, though I see through a glass darkly, someday I'll see face to face. Paul was so in this that Paul said, live or die, I can do either. The minute I start hoping for what I was made for, what's going to happen to me? What am I going to feel when I start to hope? Come on, what am I going to feel? Alive. Yeah. By the way, I'm going to show you something that looks like living here on the back here. I got more. I'm going to flip this thing around in a second. The minute I start hoping, I'm going to start feeling like afraid. It's scary to hope. What's scary about hoping? Yeah. What if I don't get what I hope for? So if I don't want to hope, watch this. If I don't want to feel, go back here, read this. If I don't want to need, which, by the way, the man or the woman that came into the world wanting to belong and matter, the child never says to the parent, what's wrong with you that I'm having to perform for you not to abandon me? The child always says, what's wrong with me that I'm not enough, that they won't stay with me? What's wrong with me that I'm in need of these parents to matter and belong to them? Because I don't truly deep inside believe that I do. Now, I'm not saying you don't. Some of you got great parents, but even your parents are, like my son said to me, Dad, you're probably a really good dad, but I wasn't going to want to be with you because you weren't human. You were just I was this pastor that he thought was bigger than life, that didn't have any needs. That's the way he perceived me, because I was becoming a robot, godly man who knew all this truth and living from the neck up. And my son was trying to connect like this. And I'm trying to connect like this with what he knows and what I know. And he's going, Dad, I want a relationship with you. I don't want to know what you think. I want your heart, Dad. That's what he meant by that. Like, that's what he meant by, like I wasn't going to be your friend. Because I never had you. I just had what you think. I didn't have your heart. Which meant you weren't human to me. Which is why you couldn't be my friend. You just had to be some dad out there who was like providing and teaching me godly things, but never being a human being in front of me to give me permission to be a human being as well. See that? You tracking with me? Okay. I'm actually on time, I think. So, what happens is we begin to despise our neediness. So the very thing that we have that allows us to walk in relationship with God is the thing about us we most despise, which is why we become independent and self-sufficient. See that? And we despise how much we need God or even each other. And if you don't want to need, well, the way to not need is to not feel. And the way to not feel is to not see. Because if I have to see my life and tell the truth about it, I'm going to have feelings about it. And if I start having feelings about it, now I'm going to open me up to my need. I start being needy, now I'm going to start realizing, gosh, if I can tell the truth about my need, now I can start telling the truth about what I desire. It's getting more vulnerable. Do you see how vulnerable this is getting? How intimate and transparent? I start desiring, now I move to longing. Like, I was made for more than this. I long for a world of justice and peace. I long for Eden. I long for what I was made for. And then I start hoping that someday I'll have that. And now it's really scary. Which means I go right back to here again. Someone said I'm alive. Yeah, I'm alive. But that means I'm what? I'm seeing my life. I'm feeling my life. I'm telling the truth about how much I'm in need, how much I want, how much I was made for, and how much I hope someday it'll be like that. This line up here is called expectation, and this line here is called reality. If expectation is up here and reality is down here, what's this gap called in the middle? Called disappointment. Okay? So how do we minimize our disappointment? If we have a high expectation and our reality's down here, in this distance called disappointment, how do we minimize our disappointment? What's that? Yeah, I'm going to lower my expectation, or what? What's that? Well, there's only so much you can do with reality. He said increase reality. Like, no, your life is what it is. You know? Yeah. He said, yeah, it is. Okay. How about this? How about not have to tell the truth about my reality? Like have to pretend it's better than it is. When I was 3 years old, my dad had been serially unfaithful to my mom. When I was 3 years old, he divorced my mom to marry a woman he'd been having an affair with. When I was 5, he divorced that woman. Her name was Debbie, and he came back and remarried my mom when I was 5. He stayed with my mom for 9 months and then divorced my mom again and then went back and remarried the woman he'd been married to the time before. And so I was 5 years old. I'd lost my dad twice. And I was awful little. I don't remember a whole lot about those days. There's a few things I remember. I remember that he had told my mom he was going to leave, and my mom was pregnant with my little sister at the time. And my mom said, will you wait till Judy's born, and then will you at least wait till Christmas? My dad said, I'll do that. And so what I do remember, it's one of my earliest life memories. I just remember, and I was 3. It's a really young memory, but I do remember it. I remember seeing my dad on the night of Christmas Day, standing in the doorway with a couple suitcases. And what I remember about that night was I remember my brothers and sisters were crying. And I wasn't old enough to know what was happening. My world was getting ready to explode. I didn't know. I just saw my brothers and sisters crying, so I started crying with them. I just remember crying, watching them cry. And my dad walked out. He waited till Christmas and left the night of Christmas Day. And you know what I said all my life? I said stuff like, because we said it, I said stuff like, you know what, we're better off without my dad. We said stuff like, when I met my wife even, we were dating, and she said, you never talk about your dad. And I said, you know what, I never had a dad, so I really don't know what I was missing, so I really didn't miss out on not having him. You know what that was? That was me being in denial of my reality. Truth is, when my dad walked out of our house, I'm not sure that could be much more devastating. I got 2 teenage boys at home. If I just stay in Memphis, is that going to be a big deal to them? If I just never came home, would it be a big deal to them? Like maybe nothing more earth-shattering. There could be some things, but not very many. But it didn't. My wife said it didn't affect you at all, because we just kind of went on. Did it affect us? You bet it did. But I couldn't. It was years before I could actually talk about the hurt and the sadness and the loneliness of growing up without him, and how much I had to figure out by myself. How by myself I was most of my life. And how much when I'm with my oldest son, I'm reminded of how much I did what he's doing, but I did it by myself. And it's so sad to me. But for most of my life, I pretended it didn't get to me, so that I wouldn't have very much disappointment. And so we live in this little narrow band in here called survival, where I have low expectations and I'm in denial of my reality. And here's what you need to hear. Christians of all people, like hear this now. God, time-wise, I may be hurting myself here. Christians of all people, I believe, have the highest expectations about their life. And I want you to have really high expectations. Why? Why would a Christian have a higher expectation about life than anybody else? I mean this. Like don't lower your expectations. You have the greatest hope, what'd you say? Created by God with the greatest hope. Hope of what? Listen, you know what you were made for. Even coming into the world fallen. Ecclesiastes said eternity. You were born with eternity in your heart. You know you were made for more. In fact, you know you're made to live forever. You know everyone does live forever, by the way. That's why eternal life isn't a length of life, it's a kind of life. It's a life in relationship with God. So you're going to live forever in relationship with God, or you're going to live forever not in relationship with him. But you are going to live forever. You are and I are. We are eternal beings. And we know we were made to live forever. That's why we don't think we're going to die until we're really old. Like even when we're really old, we're in denial that we're going to die. Because we're made not to die. And then even when we're really old, we're in denial that we're going to die. Until it actually happens. You with me on that? Because we weren't made to die. And we were made for a place better than this. It's in us. And then when you come to know the God that made you eternally, and you start your eternal relationship with him, which by the way, your eternal life doesn't start when you die. When does your eternal life start? The moment you're in relationship with Christ again. which means you're beginning your eternal life. And that's when Paul says, though I see through a glass darkly, someday I'll see face to face. He's saying there are moments in your life, not very many, but it does happen, when you peer through this frosty glass or in this mirror you can barely see, barely opaquely, and you have these moments of glory when you touch and are reminded of the eternal and what you're made for and how you're made and who you're made to be with, and you go, God, this is so good. And then you go back and like have to study for an exam or something. Or have to deal with somebody you don't like. Well, you know what I'm saying? Like you go back to reality. Theologians call that you're in the now but the not yet. Like you're already connected to what's coming for you, but you still have to live here. You get that? So you ought to have high expectations because of all people on planet Earth, you're the only one that knows what you were made for. You're the only one that's tasted it. Everybody else is walking around in the dark, trying to make it better than it is. And you're going, no, I don't have to make it better than it is. I can tell the truth that it really isn't good a lot of times, but I know the God that made me, and I have moments of intimacy, just moments of Him and with others that remind me of the greater I was made for, which means my expectations are really high. And by the way, it also means I can tell the truth about my life more than anybody else, which means the gap for me is bigger than anybody else. And by the way, I don't have to lower my disappointment. You know why? Life's bigger than my disappointment. You know who I meet in my disappointment? I want you to see this. Who do I meet or who do I experience in my disappointment? In this marriage, with these children, with this job, with this body. Who do I meet? The seed of the woman promised in Genesis 3. And so what happens is, I've got great disappointment, and I've got a great God who's enough for all of it. And I see that great God, and I get to experience that great God like the woman in Luke 7. And I don't need a itty-bitty God to fit in my itty-bitty little need because I don't have very high expectations, and I'm in denial about what my life is really like. You see that? So what I want to give you is just a teaser about this, okay? It's just a teaser. Did I get everything on here? I really did. Okay, watch this. So I'm going to talk about feelings. And you have a handout. This is your only handout. And I'm going to go through this so fast. Okay? And you can go to a place called Chip. Actually, two things. One, if you have this Bible study, there's videos that go with every one of, there's like an 8 to 10 minute video that goes with every one of these 8 feelings that comes with this. So you can see all this. You can watch Chip Dodd teach it way better than what I can do with it. But I'm just going to like blow through real quickly and give you some gifts on this, okay? So this is how we're going to end. We got 10 minutes to do it, okay? These 8 words, what do you notice about them? There's 8 feeling words. They're all negative. Well, maybe except for that one. Okay? I want you to hear this. They're all good. There's nothing negative about them. And you're going to see this in a second. Very, very observant. But they're all good. We think they're bad. They're all good. Watch this. In this left-hand column, it's not on your notes, but I want you to write this over here. I want you to write, on this side, I want you to write flesh. This left-hand column, flesh, control, power, okay? Self-will. That's what you write over here above this left-hand column. Right-hand column, I want you to write surrender, abiding, Spirit-filled, okay, yielded, vulnerable. You with that? You with me on that? Okay, that's vulnerable. I wrote it in Hebrew, okay? All right, now watch this, because this is just another way of looking at the Spirit-filled life in the context of how God made you, okay? And here's what I want you to see. Most of what we respond to and react to when we talk about feelings are not the feelings themselves. We react to what happens to us when we don't tell the truth about our feelings. And that's what I'm going to show you right now, real quickly, okay? The first one I'm going to talk about is fear, okay? What have you been taught about fear as it relates to walking with the Lord, generally speaking? Yeah, you're not supposed to be afraid. It's bad. What else? Fear is the lack of faith, right? What are some verses that you've heard to prove that or proof text that? It doesn't prove it, it proof texts it. What? God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, Love, sound, all that. Yeah, beautiful, okay? That word fear there is not fear. The word is, God has not given us a spirit of cowardice, but of courage. It's a different word. To be a man of courage or a woman of courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It does mean there's something that matters more to you than what you're afraid of, and you're going to do it anyway. That's not at all about fear. That's about being a man or woman of courage and passion and willingness to do things that are scary, which is courage. It's not about fear. It's translated fear, but it's not the Greek word in fear. It's cowardice. God has not given us a spirit of cowardice. Okay, what's another verse? Perfect love casts out fear. 1 John chapter 4. Okay, context is king. That means the context determines the meaning. In 1 John chapter 4, I love this one. In 1 John chapter 4, John's talking. He says, God is love. It's who God is. And if you know this God who's love, you'll have the love of God in you. And the more you know this God who's love, the more love of his will be inside you. And he goes, you're going to know you're his because you're going to love because God is love and love is in you and God is in you. And he's kind of going around and around like that. And then he says this, because all that's true and you're knowing this God who's love and you have the love of God in you and you know he's in you because you know love is in you, he says, you do not have to be afraid. You go look it up in 1 John 4. You don't have to be afraid about the day of judgment that this God who you know and who knows you is going to put you away and somehow send you to hell. And he says, perfect love casts out fear. Fear of what? Fear of cancer, fear of getting hit by a car, fear of failing a class. What kind of fear is he talking about in 1 John 4? Fear of eternal judgment. And he says, you don't have to be afraid of that. And my love for you, the more you know I love you and my love is in you, you're not going to be afraid of your judgment day. That's what he's talking about there. Whole different kind of fear. What's another one? We use the Bible all the time to talk us out of our human need of God. There's 365 verses in the Bible that say, fear not, one for every day of the year, so you never have to be afraid. You look up most of them, not all, but most of them are going to sound like this. Fear not because I'm with you. Fear not because I won't forsake you. Fear not because I'm your righteous right hand. Fear not because I will uphold you. They're all about relationship. Chip Dowd, I've heard him say this. Kids aren't afraid of the dark. They're afraid of being alone in the dark. Go to Psalm 23. Who's the shepherd in Psalm 23? The Lord. Who's the sheep in Psalm 23? We are. And how does that psalm start? What kind of places the shepherd got the sheep? They're lying down by green pastures, restoring my soul. Like you're going, wow, this is awesome. I'm a sheep and he's the shepherd and he's taking me all these great places. And then what happens in the same psalm? By the way, where he's the shepherd and you're the sheep, same psalm, he's led you to these green pastures, he's restoring your soul. Now where are you? Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Now you may have gone in there and he may have come in there after you, but hang with me on this. There's a good possibility the shepherd who led you to those other places may have led you into that valley. And it may be his mercy that you're there. Genesis 3. He says, I will fear no evil, not because the valley of shadow of death is not a scary place. I fear no evil because of what? Thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou, shepherd, dost prepare a table before me in the presence of who? My enemies. People that want to harm me. Who put me at the table? Who put the enemies at the table? And yet, it says that you bless me at this table with these people that want to harm me. And the only reason I can be there is because you're with me. If one of my kids was in here, let's just take one of my boys. Let's take my 14-year-old and let's make him a little bit younger. Let's make him like 6. And let's put him right there. And let's say this room starts to shake like an earthquake and walls start to come down and stuff's starting to fall. What's he feeling? What's he feeling? Fear. Okay, what's he going to do when he knows how afraid he is? Where's he going to run? Why to me? I'm the farthest from the door. And I'm the oldest guy in here. He needs to go to you. He's going to run to me. Now, why is he going to run to me? Why is he going to run to me? Why is he going to run to me? Because he knows something about me. What does he know? Yeah. See, I started that whole equation by making sure he knew first that I was a dad that loves him. By the way, that son's adopted as well, so he's had to learn I love him because he came into this world believing he was rejected and rejectable. He's African American, which means it was very early on he knew he wasn't mine, like physically. He's looking around going, you're not my dad. And it's been harder for him, and I've got another African American son, it's been harder for those two boys than for my other 4 kids. Because their first thoughts about themselves was, I'm not wanted. I don't belong and matter to anybody. And they have had the hardest of my 6 believing that they belong and matter to me. Because they were born believing they're not. And limbically, they struggled. The minute they were taken from their birth mom, they were in survival mode. They weren't thinking about it, but their limbic system was saying, where's my mom? It's physiological. It's limbic. And so they've struggled in different ways. Them other kids even haven't. My son, even that son, who's not quite sure sometimes whether he belongs and matters to me, and it's not because I don't love him, it's because he's just not sure. That boy will come find me. Now, I don't want, as his dad, I don't want my son sitting over there going, look at me, Daddy, I'm not afraid. I really am trusting in you right now. See, I'm sitting over here. I'm not have to go anywhere. What do I want my son to do in that case when he's afraid? As his dad, what do I want him to do? Come running to me. And what's going to cause him to run to me? Fear. You see, fear is not the absence of faith. Fear is the human recognition that I live in a place that can harm me, and I better go find a God who will care for me. See, fear is not the absence of faith. Fear is the human confession that leads to faith. And I'll go find a God that I can put my faith in who's faithful. So the gift of fear is faith in wisdom. Wisdom is he's a trustworthy God who's been there when I've run to him. Fear is not the absence of faith. Fear leads me to reach in faith. Do you see that? Do you see that? This is huge. And if I won't tell the truth about my fear, what my heart won't do, my body will. And I'll start getting anxious. Anxiety, this is all about power and control in the flesh. What happens is anxiety is I'll stay in control by running out all the scenarios of what might happen to prepare myself to deal with them when they happen. And most of them are never going to happen. I heard somebody say recently, the worst thing that ever happened to me never happened to me. But I imagined what was going to happen to me and I prepared myself for it. That's called anxiety. And then it becomes physical. And then when I can't control what I am afraid of, I'll move toward rage. Rage. Rage is about fear. Someone who's raging is scared and doesn't know it. Because when I can't control what I'm afraid of, I will get big to try to bring it under control. If you've got a parent that was a rager, it's because they were terrified and couldn't tell the truth about it and didn't know they had a God who'd be with them in what they were afraid of. And so they raged at you to bring you under control because they couldn't control what you were doing. And they were so terrified of their own failure as a parent, what you might do, whatever it might have been, their own life, whatever, their future. Ragers are afraid and won't tell the truth about it. Fear is a gift. It's not a negative. Let me give you another one. Sadness. The gift of sadness is being okay with what's not okay. Now, if there's one thing in life you can be most sure of, is that if you live long enough, anything that matters to you, you're going to lose. You with me on that? If you live long enough, you're going to lose everything that matters to you. So how do you keep from being sad if you're going to lose whatever matters to you? And it's just a matter of time you're going to lose it. How do you keep from being sad? You build a wall. Yeah, you do this. Like, watch this. Like, so if I can't do sadness, I'm going to have to keep everything out here. Because if I were to do this and then I lose it, what's going to happen? I'm going to have to grieve. What I'm saying to you is there is a way to grieve unto life. To grieve and to wake up tomorrow morning and still be crying and still be alive. And know you got a God who's with you and someone else who sees your tears. Listen, when I die someday, I pray to God my kids weep their guts out for days. Genuinely sad. And there's 2 ways they can be sad. They can be sad about what they never had and now they'll never have. Or they can be sad because what they got and what they had with me, that they just lost it. And their tears will honor me. And they will honor what they had with me. Do you see that? Sadness is the honoring feeling. If someone or something matters, you're going to grieve if you lose it. And the only way you can even attach to them is if you're willing to grieve when you do lose them, because you will lose them if you live long enough. Which means you can't live if you can't be sad. You can't attach and draw anything close if you can't grieve. And if you can't be sad, well, you'll move to self-pity. And this is about power and control. If I won't do my sadness, I'll need you to do it for me, which means I'm going to be full of self-pity, and I need you to be sad for me. I'm going to go very quickly here. Hurt, the gift of hurt is healing. If I can't tell the truth about my hurt, I can't go to you or to God for healing for that hurt. And I want you to know, in the brain, the human brain, you know that emotional hurt registers in the same place as physical hurt? Which is why, what are some of the terms we use for being hurt? I was stabbed in the back, kicked in the gut, because it's physical, because we see it that profoundly. And healing results in courage. How's courage got to do with healing? I know that I can go fight in a battle and be wounded deeply, and there's a place of healing with you or with God or both that allows me to come back and heal and then go back and fight again with courage. And I don't have to be bound in my fear of being hurt, because I can go fight, be hurt, but I know there's healing, so I can be a man of courage and passion. You see that? If I can't be hurt, I'll move toward resentment, which means I'm going to be powerful and resent you for the hurt you caused me, which means you're not going to get to me. There's no vulnerability over here. There's no surrender over here. There's no God over here. There's just me. God's all in here. This is the Beatitudes over here. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who thirst. Blessed are those who hunger. Blessed are those who are broken. Do you see that? Very quickly. God goes quick. Can you get 2 more minutes? Can you stay 2 more minutes? Okay. Lonely. The gift of loneliness is intimacy, intimacy. That I was made to have somebody see inside me. I'm lonely for heaven, I'm lonely for God, I'm lonely for you, and I'm lonely for myself. And I was made to be connected. And if I know I'm lonely, I'll reach out in relationship. And if I can't tell the truth about my loneliness, well, I'll move toward apathy. And you know what? You don't matter to me. That's what I did with my dad. Well, I didn't never know what it was like to have a dad. I don't know what it was like, it didn't, but that's apathy. So he's not getting to me. I'm not living either. Healthy shame. Healthy shame is a condition of my birth. That means I'm okay to be in need. It's not what's wrong with me. It's what's right about me. It leads to humility, which actually then leads to empathy. If I give myself permission to be human, I'm going to give you permission to be human. I heard someone say one time, they said, I'm harder on myself than I am on anybody else. That's impossible. You're always hard on, you aren't harder on yourself than you are on others. If you're hard on yourself, you'll be hard on others. Because if you don't give yourself permission to be in need, you won't give anyone around you permission. And they'll know it. There's a whole lot more to this I don't have time to give you. Guilt. Guilt's a wonderful feeling. If you don't know you're guilty, you won't ask for forgiveness and you won't experience freedom. And if you won't be guilty or you won't be in shame, you move to something called toxic shame. Toxic shame says I have contempt for my humanity and something's wrong with me. I'm not a person that makes a mistake. I am a mistake. When it comes to guilt, toxic shame looks like shamelessness. I have no sense that I can even harm you or harm anyone else or cross any moral boundaries. Do you see that? Finally, gladness. Gladness is the only one down here. Somebody says that's the only positive one on here. That's not true at all. You need to hear this. If I'm a man, I didn't even do anger. The gift of anger is passion. That means wanting. It's not rage. It's very different. Jesus was the angriest man that ever lived. He wanted more than anyone's ever wanted, which means he was willing to do what he was afraid to do. In the Garden of Gethsemane, what was Jesus feeling? When his disciples wouldn't stay awake, what was he feeling? Lonely and hurt. And he told them. And then when he was laying there praying to his Father about what was getting ready to happen, what was he feeling? Say it. Jesus, God and man, what was he feeling? Afraid. He was afraid. And he told his Father he was. He said, can we do this another way? I'm afraid. And then one of the Gospels says that an angel actually appeared to him and reminded him of the presence of his Father. And that's when he stood up and said, not my will, but yours be done. And then with anger and passion went to a cross, which Hebrews says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross and despised the shame. What was the joy set before him? To give you and I life. Passion. By the way, do you think I'm angry? That means I'm wanting. I want something for me, and who else do I want something for? And even though I'm afraid to do this, and right now I've gone over time, so I'm even more afraid, I'm angry, which is why I'm here. And I'm passionate. But you're not afraid of me, because I'm not raging. Because you're not afraid of angry people. You're afraid of ragers. And don't confuse the two. Most of us won't be angry because we're afraid we'll rage. I'm not raging. I'm not out of control. I care about something. And this is the most vulnerable of feelings. By the way, the impairment of anger is depression. It leads to physical depression, but initially it's I will depress my desire for life and wanting anything more. So I'm going to shut everything down and not care. And it starts out spiritual and emotional before it ever becomes physiological. In gladness, Gladness comes from living a life of faith and wisdom, acceptance with what's not okay, healing and courage, intimacy, passion, humility, freedom, forgiveness. And I experience true joy, which is not circumstantial because I'm living a life on life's terms, which is full of guilt, shame, anger, lonely, hurt, sad, and fear. Genesis chapter 3. And if I can't have joy because I can't tell the truth about my life, I will have to move towards sensuousness without heart and find shortcuts that simulate living, that aren't living at all, which is where most of us go. And we camp over here and we never know true joy or gladness because we won't tell the truth about life. And someone said it earlier, this is living, and it's what you're made for. And who do you experience when you live this way? If you're vulnerable, if you're in need, and you can tell the truth about it, if you learn to be in confessional communities, talking about what's true inside you, what do you get out of that? Man, there's so much about my story I didn't get to tell you tonight about what a failure I am. And yet the Apostle Paul said, I would rather boast about my weakness that what? The power of Christ might dwell in me, because when I'm weak, I'm what? Strong, which means I'm vulnerable and I'm needy and I don't have my act together, and that's okay with me. And what do I get when I can tell the truth about all that? Like, what do I get? More basic than that. I get you. And I get God. Like, I get to be in a relationship with you. Because I'm a human being and you get to be a human being with me. And then we both get to need God together and we can both tell the truth about that. And now all of a sudden I'm getting the one human food that I was made to live with, and that's relationship. And now I'm fully alive and God is glorified. And when Jeremiah says the heart is truly deceitful, who can know it? I'll end this way. He says the heart is truly deceitful, who can know it? So what do we conclude about that in Jeremiah 17? The heart is deceitful. You can't trust it. You know what passage I'm talking about? Jeremiah 17, I'll read it and I'll end this way. The heart is more deceitful than all and is utterly desperately sick. Who can understand it? And we stop right there, which means we can't trust our hearts, right? Well, keep reading. There's an answer to the question. He says, I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind. Even that word there for mind, it's talking about the kidneys even. I test the deepest part of you. And he's saying, there is an answer to that question, and I know what's in there, and you can bring that inside outside, because I know what's there, and I want to be there with you, and I want you to tell the truth about it. When he's saying to Jeremiah, he's not saying you can't know. He's saying that I do know, so go there with me, and let me go there with you, and be there together. And now you're like the church, in need of me with each other. Do you see that? Your heart matters much more than your head. Lord, thanks for tonight. Thanks for these men and women that are here to be discipled and disciple one another, for their open hearts, their teachable spirits, their listening ears, their openness, Lord. And I pray, God, save us from I know it's not irrelevant what we think. I know that our minds are important. I know that truth matters. Well, I know we need to renew our minds. But God, we are not Eastern mystics, Lord. I don't believe that thinking right leads to living right. I do believe this, Lord. I do believe that a relationship with you changes the way I live. And the relationship with you changes everything about my life. So I pray for myself and these men and women. Would there be something transformational about us that's not a lot of hard work, but there's a whole lot of dependence and honesty that would be infectious in this room and outside this room and everywhere we go. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, you guys. You've been great.